Devin here with Ground Force Metal Detecting. How's everybody doing today? This video is about the XP DEUS II metal detector and custom programs on YouTube. Particularly four of the most common custom programs that I see people using, those being the Forager, Legacy, Tekkna, and Jethro. I'm going to take them and I'm going to put them side by side with the factory XP program and see, we're going to point out comparisons in the four, what they changed, and then we're going to talk about why. So I'm not a huge fan of YouTube custom programs for the XP. I think that it slows your learning process as you try to gain experience and you're putting your hours in on your metal detector using someone else's settings. I do, however, think that you can use these as really good learning tools. Watch their videos, though. Listen to why they're doing what they're doing, why they change what they change, and what it's supposed to help. Then take that knowledge and go back and apply it to your own metal detecting. Take whatever factory program, experiment, and give it a try. And do some of the tweaks yourself, but take the information and learn the concepts. Okay, it's all about learning the concepts and then applying them to your own location. I'm going to talk about the settings that they used, the settings that they changed, and we'll discuss why. And then I'm going to compare each of those to the XP factory program that they based it off of, and also compare the four to each other. The first thing I want to do here is make sure that everyone understands a concept. The XP DEUS II uses a different, unique method for setting discrimination. Discrimination in this machine, the setting is the same setting as the VDI for your first tone break in whatever tone configuration you're in other than pitch tone. The iron volume is just the volume of your first tone break. So in any case, in any program you're in, you can look at your discrimination value and then go to expert and look at your first tone break, and your first tone break is going to be at your discrimination value, and the volume of your first tone break will be the same as your iron volume setting, and one changes the other. They are exactly just two different ways to access the same setting. So just keep in mind, when you're looking at the setting iron volume, it should really be called rejected tone volume. Okay? Rejected tones being everything in your first tone break. Those are your discriminated values. Okay? Whatever you discriminate, you can set it up in your first tone break with iron volume and discrimination, or you can do it directly in the tone break menu. Okay, let's get into this. This is my chart. On the left column are all the settings in the DEUS II. I organized them with audio-related settings in the top section and performance-related settings in the bottom section. And then I took the four custom programs and put them next to the factory program that they are based off of, and then put them across the chart so that we can compare. Anything in yellow is a change that they made from the factory program. Okay, let's look at these settings. So the first thing you notice, and let's talk about Forager and Legacy. All right, both of these programs were created by Michael Eakers. He's on YouTube as It's Only Me Metal Detecting, and he does a really nice job in his videos, by the way, of explaining what he's changing and why as he goes. Does a really nice job of getting you to understand what his program's all about. But the first thing I notice here is that in both cases, he likes to use 5-tone. Okay, he changes Forager to 5-tone from the general program, and Legacy, based on the sensitive program, he changes it as well to 5-tone. And what he does is he actually sets his discrimination. We'll talk about Forager first. So Forager, he sets his discrimination down to 7.6. Effectively, that's your actual iron. Iron volume's at 8, but then he also takes the second tone break and runs it the whole way up to 46, but with a pitch of 237 hertz, way down low with the iron. Okay, so effectively rejecting everything lower than a 46 as a low iron grunt. You're going to hear all the tones as low iron grunty tones. Okay, everything from 0 the whole way up to 46. Below 0 is automatically silenced as ground. In the sensitive program, he takes his iron volume at 0, but he sets his discrimination down to 3.3. So effectively, everything up to 3.3 is silenced, ground, and then anything up to 3.3, 0 to 3.3 is silenced. But then he takes the second tone break up to 33 with a 197 hertz. So he's effectively rejecting everything up to 33 in the legacy program. You'll hear the low grunt of the iron, quote, iron tone, rejection tone. You'll hear up to 33, but you're going to hear it, as a low tone. Then in both programs, he's got a section of midtones. His midtones, in Forager go up to 75 in the fourth tone break there, and in Legacy they go up to 73. Same concept. Everything above those screams at a 951 or 961 hertz. So he's effectively saying, I'm definitely want to hear a screaming tone above 73 in Legacy, for example. Doesn't change much else. I mean, if you look down through here, okay, he tweaks the notch in Legacy to deal with coke. If you have coke where you live, I don't. I don't even know I even never heard of that before, metal detecting. But if you have coke where you live, okay, then it's a good idea to put that notch in there. Equalizer's completely personal preference. Here's the thing. Okay, the best way to adjust your equalizer, all right, when you are out metal detecting, as long as you're not in a hurry, because you're going to play around with this, find a target that is, let's just say it's a mid-tone target or even a high-tone target. Find one that's a nice solid tone. Go into the equalizer and play with it while you're listening to the tone. Okay, it's kind of the best way to really see what you actually like. Okay, and all 4 bands affect all the tones. Okay, it's not one band is not for one tone break or anything like that. It's the same. The equalizer is the same as your stereo at home. It is bands of the entire audio spectrum. Human audio spectrum. Anyway, that's the best way to do that. Audio response he does take up by 1 number. He goes from a 4 to a 5 in both cases. Both of these programs, Forager and Legacy, are deep seeking programs. So he does that so that you can really hear those deep targets better that are, What audio response does, if you didn't know, is it increases the volume of quiet tones without affecting the volume of your loud, shallow tones. Okay? It brings the low tones up. That's why it makes it a little tougher to tell the depth by the sound. The only, if you have an audio response of 5, that's really cranking up your quiet tones. The only way you can really tell the depth is you can still look at the signal strength meters, your horseshoe or whatever you have up. Those don't change with audio response. It'll still show a weak signal, even though the audio response jacked it up. You go down here to performance related in the lower section. He leaves sensitivity alone for the most part. Takes the sensitive program up to 95, again adding depth. As long as your machine is going to deal with that sensitivity in the sensitive program, go for it. reactivity he takes up by a half in both cases. He does gain depth in the frequency. So in both cases, he takes his frequency max down to 24. You're going to get a little deeper. You're going to hit a little more high conductive targets deeper and less of your shallow, low conducting targets. It'll hit them all. It just lends itself to certain types of targets. Bottle caps, he puts a bottle cap rejector on in both cases. You can play around with that. It also filters out some other stuff that you might not want filtered out. He takes the silencer off in the sensitive program. If you ever get the high tone at the edge of a iron target, you got iron here, but then you got a high tone on the sides of it. Silencer helps with that, among other things. Doesn't change anything else. So I do like the Legacy program. I have it on my machine and I use it sometimes. Play around with it. I like to experiment. I'm not closed-minded. Okay, so for the Techna program, this is by Gary Blackwell, well-known XP guy. Okay, it's different and it's similar. Okay, he takes the sensitive full tone factory program, which is the same program as the number 2 sensitive program, just switching the audio to full tone, the tones. He takes his discrimination and cranks it to 42 with an iron volume of 10. So he uses the first tone break as his discrimination in full tones. Everything up to 42 is going to have a lower rejection tone, okay? Now, in full tones, your discriminated rejected tones will have their own sliding scale of pitch, a lower sliding scale, so that they're rejected, but they don't all sound the same. You can still differentiate one from another, even in the rejected range. Then everything above a 42, he's just there's just volume settings. They're all 10. So essentially, he doesn't change a whole lot more. He's got an offset on there at 10, which just separates the accepted tones from the rejected tones a little better. Switches PDM to high square. Totally personal preference. Play around with those and see which one you like the best. Doesn't change the equalizer. Takes the sensitivity from 90 to 95. No big deal there. As long as you can, as long as you're not getting a bunch of problems with running a 95. I almost always start with 95 sensitivity anyway, and adjust as needed. He takes the silencer off, which I tend to do that too. The silencer, in my opinion, it causes me to miss some targets. The silencer is there to help quiet down falsing on large iron and big nails. But other than that, I mean, Tekkna is really one that is very minimal in change from the XP factory program. It is almost just, you can get almost the same result just by changing that discrimination. Okay, so the Jethro program. This is put out on YouTube by the Scottish Detectorist. It's different in that it is based on the factory diving program, and essentially the discrimination is set down to 0, and the it's on full tone. So he switches it from 2-tone to full tone, and then sets the discrimination at just to discriminate the ground, which will silence the ground. Anything below 0 is going to be silenced. And then he takes the volume of the second tone break down to 5. So you're going to get a very low volume on anything up to a VDI of 8, which is a second tone break. Everything else is just volume on the tones. He's got a number 5 on the offset, which, as I said, helps to separate rejection from So you're basically offsetting from a 0 up. Puts an audio filter on. Audio filters are purely personal preference audio setting. That just takes some of the sharpness off the tone. I don't like using it. My opinion is I want to hear how sharp the tone is. It helps me determine the shape of the target, or if it's an irregular, it helps me identify junky targets. Okay, so he takes his frequency max up to a 24, his reactivity up to a 2.5. So where the diving program, the reactivity was a 1, which is typical for beachy programs. He takes it up to a 2.5 to get some target separation there. Frequency max takes up to get some a little bit smaller, lower conducting targets than a 14. Takes the silencer off, just like Gary, and salt sensitivity bumps it down to from 9 to 7. Essentially, not a lot of major changes. The biggest weirdest thing is just using the diving program on land on purpose. So it's a pretty cool program. I think it's neat to try. I don't use it all the time. I play with it and dabble with it once in a while.